Most people are asleep, not physically, mentally, strategically, spiritually asleep. They walk through life reacting to everything, bleeding every time someone cuts them with words, flinching every time pressure arrives, collapsing every time the world withdraws its approval. They mistake sensitivity for depth and weakness for humility, and they wonder why the world never takes them seriously. You're here because something inside you already knows the truth. Something cold, something quiet, something that doesn't beg for validation. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince as a moral guide. He wrote it as a survival manual. A ruthless, unflinching blueprint for those willing to see reality as it is, not as they were conditioned to believe it should be. And reality rewards one kind of man above all others, not the loudest, not the most aggressive, not the one who performs strength for an audience. It rewards the composed, it respects the calculated, it fears the unreadable. You were not born soft, you were made soft by a world that needed you manageable, predictable, controllable. Today, that conditioning dies. You are not here to be liked. You are not here to be understood. You are here to become untouchable. Drop a cold eyes in the comments if you're ready. Number 2, the architecture of silence. Most men waste their greatest weapon without ever knowing they had it. They talk too much. They explain too much. They defend too much. The moment someone challenges them, they rush to justify themselves, pouring words out like a broken dam, desperate to be understood, desperate to be seen as reasonable, desperate to prove they aren't what the other person implied. And in doing so, they reveal everything. Their insecurities, their fears, their pressure points. They hand their enemies a map to their destruction and call it honesty. Stop explaining yourself to people who stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided what they think of you. Something shifts. The power dynamic inverts. The person who speaks least in a room often controls it most. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote that a prince must learn to conceal his true nature, not out of deception for its own sake, but because the world will always try to categorize you, box you, predict you. The moment you become predictable, you become manageable. And a managed man is a powerless man. Train yourself to sit in silence when others expect an outburst, to nod slowly when others expect panic, to smile quietly when others expect you to break. Not because you feel nothing, but because you have mastered the discipline of revealing nothing on their timeline. Your emotions are intelligence, they are data, but they are your data, not a public broadcast for every person in the room to analyze and exploit. The cold man isn't the man without feeling. He is the man who decides what the world gets to see and what it doesn't. That control is where real power begins. Comment silent power if you understand what most men never will. Number 3, the cold mind in a burning world. People betray you. When plans fall apart, people betray you. When plans fall apart without warning, your response in that moment is the truest measure of who you actually are beneath the performance. Not who you claim to be in comfortable conversations. Not the version of yourself you present when everything is going smoothly. The version that surfaces when the ground disappears beneath your feet. That version, raw, unfiltered, instinctive, is either your greatest asset or your most dangerous liability. When strength is easy, so the moment real when strength is easy, so the moment real adversity arrives, a sudden loss, a public failure, a betrayal from someone trusted, they shatter because they were never forged. They were only polished. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is like a river, violent, unpredictable, destructive when uncontrolled. But the prepared man builds embankments before the flood comes. He doesn't wait for the storm to decide how he'll respond. He has already decided. Long before the chaos, in the quiet moments of discipline, of mental rehearsal, of deliberate emotional conditioning. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. The practice of anticipating difficulty so thoroughly that when it arrives, it finds not a frightened man scrambling for answers, but a composed man, executing a plan he already designed. This is what separates the cold mind from the panicked one, not the absence of difficulty. Both men face difficulty equally. The difference is internal architecture. One man's mind is a house of glass, beautiful in sunlight, destroyed in storms. The other man's mind is iron, forged specifically because of storms, not in spite of them. You are building an iron mind every time you choose composure over reaction, every time you absorb pressure without broadcasting it, every time you pause before responding, choosing strategy over emotion. You are laying another brick in a fortress that the world will eventually recognize and respect without ever fully understanding. That fortress is your greatest advantage. Guard its construction with everything you have. Comment Iron Mind if you're forging yourself in the fire right now. Number 4. The strategy of being misunderstood. Let me tell you something that will disturb you at first and liberate you completely once you absorb it. The most powerful men in history were almost universally misunderstood by the people around them. Not occasionally, not temporarily, consistently. They were called cold when they were simply disciplined, called arrogant when they were simply selective, called dangerous when they were simply unwilling to be manipulated. And here is the part that separates the strategic mind from the ordinary one. They didn't correct people. They didn't chase understanding. They didn't launch campaigns to repair their reputation among those who had already chosen a narrative. They simply continued building, continued executing, continued compounding their power in silence while their critics compounded their opinions in noise. Machiavelli understood reputation as a weapon, but not in the way most people interpret it. He didn't advocate for popularity. He advocated for strategic perception. There is a profound difference. Popularity requires you to be palatable to everyone, which means you must constantly dilute yourself, soften your edges, apologize for your convictions, and shrink your presence to fit inside other people's comfort zones. Strategic perception requires something entirely different. It requires you to be consistent, unpredictable in action, but unwavering in character, and completely indifferent to the interpretations of those whose approval was never part of your architecture to begin with. When you stop needing people to understand you, something extraordinary happens psychologically. You stop performing. You stop editing your thoughts before you speak them to make them more digestible. You stop contorting your values to match whatever room you're standing in. You become singular, and singular men who operate from one fixed internal center regardless of external pressure, are among the rarest and most commanding presences any room will ever encounter. People sense it before they can name it. There is something about a man who genuinely does not need your approval that triggers a deep, almost involuntary respect. Not because he is hostile, not because he is dismissive, but because his completeness reminds everyone around him of their own incompleteness, their own desperate hunger for external validation that they have never learned to silence. This is dark psychology operating at its most elegant level. You are not manipulating anyone. You are simply refusing to be manipulated. You are withdrawing the one currency most people spend recklessly, the need to be understood. And in doing so, you create scarcity around your presence. And scarcity, as any student of power knows, is the foundation of value. Stop chasing understanding. Start building undeniability. The world doesn't need to understand you. It only needs to recognize that you cannot be moved, cannot be read, and cannot be stopped. When that recognition lands, and it will, no further explanation will ever be necessary. Comment undeniable if you're done shrinking yourself for people who were never worth your full presence. Number 5. The discipline of emotional invisibility. There is a war happening inside every man at every moment, a war between what he feels and what he shows, between the instinct to react and the discipline to respond, between the hunger for immediate emotional release and the strategic wisdom of controlled, deliberate expression. Most men lose this war daily without even realizing a battle was taking place. They wear their emotions on their face like a public announcement, every frustration visible, every insecurity readable. every fear broadcasted through their posture, their tone, their eyes, their silence, their overcompensation. And the world, which is always watching, always calculating, always searching for leverage, takes careful notes. Understand this with absolute clarity. Your emotions are not your enemy. Suppressing them entirely is not the goal and never was. That is a misunderstanding of what emotional discipline actually demands. A man completely severed from his emotional intelligence is not powerful. He is simply numb, and numbness is its own form of weakness because it removes the very data you need to make sharp, accurate decisions about people, situations, and timing. The goal is not the absence of emotion. The goal is sovereignty over emotion, the complete, unconditional ownership of what you feel when you reveal it, how much of it you release, and to whom you grant that level of access into your interior world. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must be both lion and fox. The lion commands through visible strength. The fox commands through invisible intelligence. But there is a third quality Machiavelli implied without naming directly, the quality of the mask. Not deception in the petty sense, but the disciplined presentation of a curated exterior that reveals only what serves your strategic position at any given moment. The man who has mastered this does not lie about who he is. He simply controls the timing and depth of what the world receives. He understands that full transparency is not virtue in a competitive world. It is vulnerability dressed in noble language. Dark psychology teaches us that the most influential people in any environment are rarely the most emotionally expressive. They are the most emotionally contained. When everyone around them is reacting, voices rising, composure fracturing, masks slipping, the contained man sits in his stillness like a stone in the middle of rushing water, unmoved, unreadable. And that stillness alone communicates something that no speech ever could. It says, without a single word, that this man has seen worse, survived worse, and is entirely unbothered by whatever storm currently terrifies everyone else in the room. That communication is worth more than any argument, any display of aggression, any performance of dominance you could manufacture. Begin practicing this with intention and consistency. When someone provokes you, give them 3 seconds of silence before you respond. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you are choosing the moment your words enter the room. When someone insults you publicly, let your stillness absorb it and return nothing but a calm, unreadable expression that forces them to question whether their attack even landed. When pressure mounts in a situation, slow your breathing deliberately, lower your voice rather than raising it, and watch how the entire energy of the environment shifts around you. These are not passive responses. They are acts of psychological dominance executed with zero visible effort. And zero visible effort is precisely what makes them so devastatingly effective. That level of control, quiet, invisible, that level of control, quiet, invisible, absolute, is the foundation upon which every other form of power in your life will eventually be constructed. Master this first, everything else follows. Comment sovereign if you're taking full ownership of your inner world starting today, because that's where all real power is born. Number 6, the art of strategic patience. There is a quality so rare in the modern world that when you encounter it in a man, it stops you completely. It unsettles you in ways you cannot immediately articulate. It is not confidence, though it resembles it. It is not intelligence, though it requires it. It is not strength, though it produces it. It is patience, not the passive, resigned patience of a man waiting because he has no other option, not the patience of weakness dressed in stillness, but the active, predatory, completely deliberate patience of a man who has decided exactly where he is going, exactly what he is building, and is entirely unbothered by how long the journey demands, because he understands something that the impatient majority will never grasp. That timing is not circumstance. Timing is strategy. And the man who masters timing masters outcomes. Most men are destroyed not by their enemies, but by their own impatience. They move too early. They speak too soon. They reveal their hand before the table is set. They demand results from seeds they planted yesterday. They abandon strategies that required months because they couldn't tolerate the discomfort of the gap between effort and evidence. And then they blame the world for their failures when the honest diagnosis is far simpler and far more brutal. They were defeated by their own inability to wait. Impatience is not ambition. Do not confuse the two. Ambition is directional fire, focused, sustained, strategic. Impatience is simply anxiety wearing the costume of urgency, pushing you to act before the moment is right and expose yourself before your position is fortified. Machiavelli studied the great rulers of his time with the cold precision of a surgeon, and one pattern emerged above almost all others in those who survived, consolidated power, and built something lasting. They waited. They absorbed insults without immediate retaliation when retaliation would have been premature. They allowed enemies to overextend themselves before striking. They conserved resources while others burned theirs on visible displays of strength that impressed audiences but weakened foundations. They understood that the world operates in cycles, that the man who appears to be losing in one chapter is often the man who wins definitively in the final one, simply because he had the discipline to play a longer game than everyone around him was willing to play. Dark psychology reveals something equally important about patience that operates on the interpersonal level. The man who can withhold his reaction, who can let silence sit in a conversation long past the point where most men would rush to fill it, who can deny someone the emotional response they were deliberately engineering, holds an extraordinary form of psychological leverage, because most provocations, most manipulations, most attempts to destabilize you are designed to extract a specific reaction on a specific timeline. When you deny that timeline, when you refuse to react when reaction was expected, you don't just neutralize the provocation, you reverse it entirely. The aggressor becomes the exposed one. The manipulator becomes the anxious one. The person who came to destabilize you leaves the interaction questioning their own position. And that reversal happened without you raising your voice, without you making a single accusation, without you doing anything except refusing to move on someone else's schedule. This is the discipline of strategic patience operating at its most sophisticated level. You are not waiting because you are weak. You are waiting because you are precise. A surgeon does not cut randomly and quickly because speed feels powerful. A surgeon cuts at the exact right location, at the exact right moment, with the exact right depth. And that precision is what makes the difference between healing and harm. Become the surgeon of your own responses. Become the architect of your own timing. Let the world rush and stumble around you in its perpetual urgency while you move with the quiet, unhurried certainty of a man who already knows how the story ends because he was disciplined enough to write it in advance. The most dangerous men you will ever encounter in life are not the ones who react the fastest. They are the ones who make you wait for their response, and whose response, when it finally arrives, is so precise, so measured, so perfectly timed that you realize with cold clarity that they were never reacting to you at all. They were executing a plan they had already designed. Be that man. Cultivate that patience. Guard that timing with the same ferocity you would guard any other weapon in your arsenal, because in the hands of a disciplined mind, patience is not a virtue. It is a blade. Comment surgical patience if you're done moving on everyone else's timeline and ready to operate on your own terms exclusively. Number 7. The reconstruction of identity. Let me speak to you about something that most self-improvement content will never touch, because it requires a level of honesty that makes comfortable people deeply uncomfortable. Before you can become the version of yourself that the world fears to face, you must first be willing to destroy the version of yourself that the world has already shaped without your consent, not refine it, not polish it, not gradually improve it through small, manageable adjustments that leave the fundamental architecture intact. Destroy it. Examine it with cold, unsparing clarity. Every belief you hold about who you are, every limitation you have accepted as permanent, every identity you have constructed around other people's definitions of you, and be willing to burn all of it to the ground if the honest audit reveals that it was never truly yours to begin with. This is the part of transformation that no one warns you about because it is genuinely terrifying. Not the building, the demolition. The moment you look at yourself without the protective filter of ego and recognize that significant portions of your personality were not chosen but installed. Installed by parents who projected their own fears onto your potential. Installed by environments that rewarded conformity and punished distinction. Installed by relationships that needed you small so they could feel adequate. Installed by failures you experienced before you had the wisdom to interpret them correctly. Failures you absorbed not as data, but as verdicts, carrying them forward as permanent definitions of your ceiling rather than temporary markers of your current position on a much longer journey. Machiavelli wrote that men are shaped more by necessity than by nature, that the circumstances which forge a man matter as profoundly as any innate quality he was born possessing. But here is the extension of that truth that Machiavelli's political context prevented him from stating directly. You can manufacture your own necessity. You do not have to wait for external circumstances to force your evolution. You can create the internal conditions that demand it. You can impose upon yourself a standard so uncompromising, a vision so clear, a commitment so absolute that your current identity becomes genuinely incompatible with the future you have decided to occupy. And that incompatibility, that productive, deliberate tension between who you are today and who you have decided to become, becomes the engine of a transformation that no external event could have initiated with the same depth or permanence. Dark psychology understands identity as a fluid construct rather than a fixed reality. And that understanding is one of the most liberating and simultaneously most dangerous pieces of knowledge a man can possess. It is liberating because it means no version of yourself is permanent. Every limitation you currently accept as structural is actually behavioral. Every pattern you experience as identity is actually habit. Every ceiling you recognize as yours was placed there by a combination of experience, conditioning, and repeated self-narrative, none of which are immovable, none of which require your continued endorsement. It is dangerous because the same fluidity that allows you to reconstruct yourself with intention can also allow the world to reconstruct you through manipulation if you are not the one holding the pen that writes your own story. So you must hold that pen with both hands and absolute intention. Begin the audit ruthlessly. Identify every belief about yourself that produces limitation rather than expansion. Trace its origin, not to assign blame, but to recognize that its source was external, which means it was never a fundamental truth about you, but simply a story that was repeated often enough to feel like one. Then write the replacement deliberately. Not wishful thinking dressed as identity, but a concrete, behavioral, daily enacted version of the man you have decided to become. The cold eyes that see without flinching. The calm mind that processes without panicking. The unbreakable will that advances without requiring permission or applause from any audience. Understand that this reconstruction is not a single event. It is not a moment of inspiration followed by permanent transformation. It is a daily practice of choosing the new identity over the old one in every small moment that presents a fork in the road. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you are voting for the new man. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you are reinforcing his architecture. Every time you move forward, despite fear, rather than waiting for fear to dissolve before you act, you are cementing the foundation of someone the world has not yet met, but will eventually have no choice but to reckon with. You are not who you were. You are not yet fully who you are becoming. You exist right now in the most powerful space a man can occupy, the deliberate, conscious, irreversible process of reconstruction. Most men never enter this space willingly. They change only when circumstances force them to, which means they are always reactive, always behind, always rebuilding from damage rather than building from vision. You are choosing to enter it now on your own terms, from a position of strategic clarity rather than desperate necessity. That choice alone separates you from the majority in ways that have not yet become fully visible, but will. Comment reconstructed if you're burning the old version down and building something the world has never seen before, because that man is already inside you, waiting. Number 8. The power of selective trust. There is a lesson that life will teach every man eventually. The only variable is how much it costs him before he finally learns it. Some men learn it cheaply, early, through small betrayals that sting but don't destroy. Others learn it at catastrophic expense, through devastation so complete, through betrayal so intimate, through loss so total that the recovery takes years and leaves permanent marks on the architecture of their trust. The lesson itself is deceptively simple, brutally simple. Not everyone deserves access to you, not your thoughts, not your plans, not your fears, not your ambitions, not the interior landscape of who you are beneath the surface you present to the world. Access to a man of genuine depth and power is not a right extended automatically to anyone who expresses interest or proximity. It is a privilege earned through demonstrated loyalty, proven character, and sustained consistency over time. And the man who treats it as anything less will spend his entire life handing weapons to people who will eventually use them against him. Machiavelli was unambiguous on this point in a way that made his contemporaries deeply uncomfortable and makes modern audiences equally uneasy, because it cuts against the cultural narrative that openness is virtue and vulnerability is strength. He observed that men reveal their true nature not in their declarations, but in their incentives. Not in what they say they value, but in what they consistently choose when choosing costs them something. The prince who extends trust indiscriminately does not demonstrate confidence. He demonstrates naivety dressed in generosity. And naivety at the level of power is not an innocent mistake. It is an invitation to exploitation that the world will accept without hesitation and without guilt. Dark psychology maps human behavior with a coldness that is initially disturbing and ultimately indispensable. It reveals that most people in your life occupy one of three categories that you must learn to identify with precision and treat accordingly. The first category is those who genuinely align with your growth, rare, valuable, worthy of your real self and your deepest investment. The second category is those who are neutral, transactional relationships of mutual benefit that serve a function but require no emotional depth or interior access. The third category is those who drain, compete, undermine, or subtly sabotage. And this category is far larger than most men are willing to honestly acknowledge, because acknowledging it requires confronting the uncomfortable truth that some of the people closest to them belong inside it. The discipline of selective trust demands that you become a precise reader of which category each person in your life actually occupies, not which category they claim to occupy, not which category you wish they occupied, not which category they occupied 3 years ago before circumstances changed their incentives, which category they demonstrate through consistent behavior over sufficient time. Words are the cheapest currency in any human relationship. Behavior is the only exchange rate that matters. Watch what people do when supporting you costs them something. Watch how they speak about you when they believe you cannot hear. Watch whether their energy rises or dims when you report genuine progress and expansion. These observations are not paranoia. They are the fundamental due diligence of a man who understands that his energy, his time, his interior world, and his strategic plans are finite and precious resources that deserve the same careful allocation as any other asset he is serious about protecting. Closeness is not entitlement. Proximity is not qualification. History is not permanent clearance. Selective trust is not coldness. It is precision. And precision, in every domain it is applied, is what separates the man who builds something lasting from the man who builds beautifully but repeatedly watches it collapse from the inside because he never learned to guard the gate. Comment gatekeeper if you're done giving unlimited access to people who were never worthy of the price of admission. Number 9. The silence before the strike. There is a moment, and every man who has ever operated at a high level knows exactly the moment I am describing, where everything inside you wants to move, wants to respond, wants to retaliate, wants to correct the record, reclaim the narrative, make the person in front of you understand in no uncertain terms exactly who they are dealing with and exactly what their miscalculation is going to cost them. Every instinct fires simultaneously. The jaw tightens, the breathing shortens, the mind accelerates into that familiar, urgent, dangerous place where reaction feels indistinguishable from righteousness. And in that precise moment, that razor-thin gap between provocation and response, the entire trajectory of your power is decided, not by what you do next, by whether you have the discipline to do nothing next. This is the silence before the strike, and it is the most misunderstood concept in the entire architecture of strategic power. Most men interpret silence as inaction, as acceptance, as the absence of response being equivalent to the absence of consequence. They see the composed man absorbing provocation without visible reaction and conclude that he has been defeated, that his stillness is submission dressed in dignity. They are wrong in a way that will eventually cost them everything. Because the composed man is not absorbing the provocation passively, he is cataloging it. He is filing the information with cold precision. The nature of the aggression, the timing of it, the audience present for it, the insecurity that motivated it, the weakness it revealed in the person who delivered it. He is building a complete, accurate intelligence picture, while his opponent celebrates a reaction they never actually received. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man does not telegraph his intentions to those who would use the knowledge against him. The lion announces his presence with a roar, visible, readable, predictable in his aggression. The fox moves without announcement, without declaration, without the performance of threat that gives the prey time to prepare a defense. The most effective strikes in any arena, professional, social, psychological, are the ones that arrive after a silence so sustained, so complete, so unnervingly calm that the recipient had genuinely convinced themselves the threat had passed. That false security is not accidental. It is engineered by the patient, disciplined, strategically silent man who understood from the beginning that the timing of his response mattered infinitely more than the speed of it. Dark psychology identifies this pattern in every high-stakes human environment without exception. The negotiator who speaks least controls the room. The competitor who reveals nothing about his strategy forces his opponent to operate on assumption rather than intelligence. The man who absorbs social aggression without visible reaction strips the aggressor of the one thing that made the aggression worthwhile, the audience's confirmation that it landed, and an attack that produces no visible wound does something deeply unsettling to the person who delivered it. It makes them question their own power. It plants doubt where confidence existed. It shifts the psychological balance of the entire interaction without a single word being exchanged in retaliation. Practice this with the seriousness it deserves. When the moment arrives, and it will arrive repeatedly in every arena of your life, train yourself to feel the heat of the impulse fully and release none of it visibly. Let your face remain neutral. Let your posture remain open. Let your voice, when you finally choose to use it, arrive quieter than anyone in the room expected. Because a quiet voice in a loud moment commands more attention than a shout ever could. And attention, directed with precision and released with perfect timing, is the currency through which all real power is ultimately transacted. The silence before the strike is not weakness. It is the most sophisticated form of preparation a man can demonstrate. Master it completely, and you will never need to announce your power again. The world will feel it before you speak a single word. Comment silent strike if you understand that the most powerful response is sometimes the one the world never sees coming until it's already arrived. Number 10. The man they cannot break. You have arrived. Not at the end, at the beginning. the beginning of a version of yourself that operates from cold clarity, moves with surgical patience, guards his interior world with absolute precision, and advances without requiring the world's permission or approval. Cold eyes that see everything without flinching, a calm mind that pressure cannot penetrate, an unbreakable will that bends for nothing and no one. This is not a destination. This is a daily decision. Make it every morning without exception. Comment, unbreakable. If you're ready to become the version of yourself everyone fears to face. If this monologue moved something inside you, like this video, subscribe to Machiavellian Mind and turn on notifications. The weak scroll past, the strong stay locked in. Which one are you?